everybody, and welcome to our next interview. We hope you guys are well, and thank you so much for joining us today. We are beyond excited to talk to our lovely guest that we have for you today. So Paul is just going to introduce him.
Cool. So our guest today was born in Venezuela. He has worked in dance, in theatre, in visual arts, in film. His dance pieces include such things as Elsa Canasta, Anatomy of the Passing Cloud, Eternal Damnation to Sancho and Sanchez, and The Most Incredible Thing. He's worked in theatre, choreographing such musicals as Carousel at Chichester, Cabaret, of which he won an Olivier for his choreographic work, from Here to Eternity, and he's had a long and fruitful relationship with the artist director of the National Theatre, Rufus Norris, of who he's worked on plays such as Death of the King's Horseman, Everyman, and London Road, for instance. Fantastic. And so he is a master at his craft and a wonderful friend of ours. Ladies and gentlemen, Javier de Frutos.
Yay.
How are you?
I'm good, Ali. How are you?
Oh, we're good. How are you coping in this craziness?
I'm coping. It's a new set of rules every day, so it's slightly surreal. I take note and try to figure out what the next day is going to be. But yeah, I've never been so aware of time passing as I have been now.
But no children to homeschool, no?
No children, just a really lovely dog.
Oh,
that's cool.
That works.
Thank you for joining us, Javier, because you're in New York actually at the moment, so we really appreciate this this technology that allows us to talk together.
I know, isn't it great? Isn't it great we can do this? Yeah.
I'm catching up with people I haven't spoken to for years.
Yeah, I know.
Cool. So we do have questions for you.
All the
Yes, great. Go ahead.
Possible, but I'm sure questions will come up as we do it. So I'll tell you what, let's go right back to the beginning. When did you first get into dance? How did it happen? Do you come from a dancing family? What was your family's reaction when you said you wanted to go into dance?
No, and no.
Excellent. Let's move on.
Yeah. I was always interested. I was born in Venezuela. I was born in Caracas. I'm Spanish, but I was born in Caracas, which at that time was incredibly vibrant culturally. There was a lot of money, so we could see a lot of incredible shows, and the International Arts Festival in Caracas was really the most extraordinary way to get to know art from everywhere. So my interactions with Nikolai Dance Company and Merce Cunningham, Graham, and then the extraordinary company of Lindsay Camp, and funny enough that I'm now friends with Francoise. For the longest time, although we have known each other since I was probably 18. I drove him from bar to bar when they were performing there, and again, it was just great education, and with the great education came great curiosity, and I wanted to be part of it. There was also a great exchange between companies, and what it was the Caracas Taller de Danza Contemporánea, which is the main contemporary company in Caracas. I started taking classes pretty late, at age 16, and kind of sneaking out of classes in high school and going to do class without telling anybody. And it so happened that I had an able body. So I started late, but I had a body that already had a certain amount of pluses, and I guess the intelligence and the willingness and the obsessiveness, which is a great thing, and I think is something that is interesting for a lot of different dancers, and I think that especially the ones that turn into being choreographers. I think starting late means that you need to catch up very quickly, but you have certain amount of intelligence to keep the obsession going. And I think that when you start younger, it may make you a a different dancer, especially in the classical terms, but almost you don't have the same level of discipline. It's been inculcated to you since you are a kid. In my case, it was a choice. It really was. Um, never a profession, but a vocation to begin with, that became a profession after. And vocation is a nice, clever word to say obsession without having to give you medication.
Very true.
So,
That's
so
a mirror for you, Paul, isn't it? Because you were late to dance. You were 17 when you started. So
yeah.
Interesting mirror there.
But then I started reading. I became obsessive with reading people that started late. I became also obsessive with people that started late, or had or they were behind in some kind of education in their craft. So, for instance, I not Baryshnikov, but Nureyev also started at age 17. And I thought, well, if it's good for him, I guess it's good for me. You know, composers like Irving Berlin never learned to read music. There were not music readers, which I thought that was a shocking thing to me. The same thing with Pavarotti. He couldn't read a note. It was all, he had to use different sides of his brain. And I thought, well, you know, this is going to be the way that it's going to be, and I'm going to have to find my own way to codify my education. So that became some kind of obsession. And since very young age, I had the opportunity to see a lot. I had a family that was very supportive in me and them going to see theater. My father was a war survivor from the Spanish Revolution, and somehow when he moved to Venezuela, he never finished school, so he wanted us to have an education, and education meant a lot of reading. We had lots of books. Reading was very important for us, and going to see opera and theater, and it was never children's plays. It was just, you know, if we're going to go to the theater, we would go to see Edward Albee and Tennessee Williams and stuff like that, because, you know, reading was important, and we had no censorship in my family. But obviously I didn't count on the fact that actually me becoming involved in the arts was going to be an issue in itself. Me being educated in the arts was one thing, but me being part of it was probably a completely different matter altogether, which meant issues with religion, but issues also with sexuality. So, you know, if you were involved in the arts, you were gay. Well, he was right. But it had nothing to do with me wanting to be involved in the arts. You know, one thing would have never stopped the other. So I started, at one point the choice was that my father wanted me to go to university, and so did I. We all did. And university in Venezuela was at the highest standard, not anymore, of course, for obvious reasons, but incredibly high standards. And the closest thing to a school of arts, because the School of Arts had not opened, was the School of Architecture. It was the most artistic thing of all the things that you could study at university. So that's what I chose, and I graduated very early. I graduated at age 17, so I went to university pretty much. I hadn't even turned 18 when I was going to university, and then eventually I got a car so I could drive to university every morning. And within 6 months of me starting university, I had already I was already doing classes, and I was already moving on quite quickly doing those classes. The School of Arts opened. It was the new pilot project in some borrowed building in the middle of the amazing campus that the university had. And I don't know what happened. One morning, instead of turning to the left to the architecture faculty, I turned to the right and I went to the School of Arts, and I said I want to change. And I didn't tell my parents until probably about 2 years later, where they thought that I was when they thought that I was about to graduate from architecture, I was not even near and I was in the midst of studying philosophy and stagecraft and
Mm-hmm.
playwriting and all that stuff, and taking classes, and more importantly, already pretty ready to audition and to do shows that I wouldn't tell anybody that I was part of.
Amazing.
So I don't know how I kept that for that long. And obviously, when they found out, they were not incredibly happy. But also, when they found out, we were all of certain age in which we could make our own decisions.
Mm-hmm.
The country had changed virtually overnight, and they went to Spain. I stayed in Venezuela just a tiny bit longer until it became unfeasible. And then the choice was, at that time, there were only 3 places in the world that really, if you were serious about you were doing, that's where you would go. And one of them was London, the other one was New York, and the third one was Paris. And I chased the 3 of them, but I was also chasing one particular teacher called Viola Farber, who was the first generation of Cunningham, and pretty much the person responsible for bringing Cunningham to France. And I adored her, and I had heard so many urban tales about her that I felt that she was the person I needed to follow. And in the midst of following, I discovered that she had left France, which is where I went first. Mm-hmm. And she was part of the faculty of London Contemporary Dance School, and that's where I went. I auditioned, I went, she took me, and I became the person that kind of broke the mold, not to their liking of not really following the gram basis that the company and the school had at the moment, but the post Cunningham stuff that that Viola was bringing in. But more important from that, New York, because of course Viola couldn't be more American if she tried, and an American in London becomes doubly American. So the idea is that at one point I was going to be leaving, and these were slightly different times in the European Union. So Spain was a fully fledged member of the European Union, and I'm a Spanish citizen. But also there was a period of grace that now doesn't quite work, or it didn't used to work anymore with the UK, in which you couldn't be formally working on any company or any organization for at least 7 years. So it was outside the realm of possibilities that I would join London Contemporary Dance Theatre, which is what we all wanted to do at that time, and to work with Bob Cohen. And Viola kind of turned around very quickly, and she said, I think you need to leave. I have spoken to Merce, and Merce says, come over and take class. And I don't know how it happened, guys, because I don't have the same level of chutzpah that I had at that time. But I cannot even remember packing. I just remember being on a plane and arriving in New York. And there I was for about 5 years. But the inspiration, strangely, the inspiration was strangely never dance. And this is probably what makes more sense to me, is that I was lucky to see a lot of shows, and I was lucky also to travel and see a lot of shows and see a lot of dance shows. Some great that were very inspiring and highly intimidating, because trying to reach that level was great intimidation. But also some that were really not great, and probably the most inspiring shows were the bad ones. The bad ones make me think, well, I can't do better than that. So maybe I should start doing my own work, because it really cannot be worse than what I just seen. and that felt really more motivated. I started becoming very obsessed in going to see bad shows so I could get up in the morning and do something better. But also theatrically, I found something that it's hard to explain, but it kind of ignited something in my head, which was going to see an off-Broadway performance of Carol Churchill's Cloud Nine. For those of us who know Carol Churchill, that's weird to begin with, and strange and obscure and highly experimental, and cryptic. But what it was more cryptic was the fact that it was directed by a Broadway, very famous Broadway choreographer and maker of the biggest hits of the 20th century, called Tommy Tune. Tommy Tune directed Carol Churchill, was already so off left field. But when I saw it, and it's a play, it was never a musical, it's a play, very much following the specifications of Carol. And there was some level of fluidity and stagecraft and attention to detail and wording and staging that made me think that's the kind of theater I want to make. Mm-hmm. But in my very strange head, I thought the only way for me to make that theater is that I need to study to be a choreographer, mm-hmm. not a theater director. Mm-hmm. I just knew that there was an element of craft that had less BS. I'm sorry, everybody will translate that whichever way they want. You know, it just is something very straightforward and very matter of fact about choreographers directing theater that goes beyond directors wanting to do musicals or the other way around, or directors doing stuff. It's a lot of talking and very little action. And I believe in the action of theater. So Tommy brought that inspiration. And that's kind of how I became a choreographer, because I wanted to direct theater.